Once I offer the mindful check-in to students, I then explain to them that these are the kinds of things about their mind and body that I'm going to be asking them to pay attention to when they do the mindful tech exercises. I'm not going to suggest that you or they run through a list of these, but just to notice which things are most salient. With that as a kind of background, let's move on to the cell phone meditation. Basically, what's going to happen over the next 5 or 7 minutes is I'm going to ask you to undertake a series of actions with your cell phone. And while you're doing them, to notice what's arising in your mind and body. To help you with this, I suggest you have a piece of paper next to you where you write down the numbers 1 through 5. You don't have to do this exercise by writing anything down. But by putting these numbers 1 to 5 on a page, these numbers will correspond to the 5 actions that I'm going to ask you to perform. And when I give you the instructions for each of these steps, I'm going to ask you to write down a few words or phrases describing what happened when you undertook that action. In other words, what happened in your immediate experience. So for example, suppose in step 3, I said to you, throw your phone against the wall. Obviously, I'm not going to ask you to do that. But if I did ask you to do that, obviously certain things would come up in your mind and body. You might hold your breath. You might suddenly feel anxious. You might actually think, no, I'm not going to do that. Certain things would arise, and then as you did it or did not do what I was asking you to do, you'd write down a few words or phrases next to the number 3 on your piece of paper. Okay, just a few more things and we're going to get started. I suggest that to start the exercise that you actually put your phone away. At the very least, don't be holding on to it and don't be looking at it. It could be in a pocket or a bag or just on the desk or chair a little bit of a distance from you. Second, please wait until I finish the instructions for each step before doing anything. And finally, you of course can always stop the recording if you want to take more time. Because of limited time, I'm going to run through this exercise more quickly than I would typically do with a group of students. Okay, so here goes. Step number 1, think about your cell phone. I don't want you to hold it. I don't want you to take it out. I simply want you to call to mind your cell phone. Notice what's arising in your mind and body when you think about your cell phone, and take a moment to write down a few words or phrases describing what you noticed. Okay, thank you for doing that. Step number 2. Now I'd like you to take out your phone and hold it in your hand, but don't unlock it or turn it on. And once again, see what arises in your mind and body when you do this, and write down a few words or phrases. Okay, thank you for step number 2. And now let's move on to step number 3. Now I do want you to turn on and unlock your phone and open your email inbox. And then I'd like you to scan the headers in your inbox, but please don't open or read any of the messages. So please go ahead, scan your inbox, and see what happens in your mind and body when you do that, and write down a few words or phrases. Okay, thank you. And now let's move on to step number 4. Now I do want you to open and read a message. I say here, if you have the time to respond quickly, you can do that as well, but since we're doing this exercise in such an abbreviated form, I suggest that you only open and read a message. And again, notice what arises in your experience as you do this, and write down a few words or phrases. Okay, thank you. That was step number 4. And then for step number 5, I'd like you to notice what kind of reaction you have to just hearing the instructions, and then also what you do when you carry them out. Step number 5, put your phone away. Put it out of sight, put it in a pocket, whatever you need to do to put it away, and see what arises in your mind and body, and write down a few words or phrases. Okay, thank you. That's the exercise in abbreviated form. When I use this exercise in the classroom or in a workshop, I also allow time for debriefing, which is a very important part of the exercise. That is for some people to report back what they noticed when they did it. But in the interest of time in this webinar, I'm not going to do that, since I'd rather reserve time at the end of the webinar for Q&A. But at the very least, I hope by doing this exercise ever so briefly, you got a sense of what I mean by observing your mind and body while you're online. And you may also have seen how this kind of observation has the potential to illuminate your relationship with a device or app. For example, you might have noticed some anxiety when you scanned your inbox, which might have been reflected as well in your breath and posture. You might have noticed some pleasure at taking your phone out and disappointment when you were asked to put it away, or perhaps even the opposite. But the next step in doing this kind of work is to figure out how to make use of these kinds of observations as the basis for reflecting and ultimately making changes. What I'm basically suggesting here is that observation matters. In this kind of observation matters, as I've been seeing for over 10 years of doing this work with students and adult practitioners. It matters because it actually reveals our current online habits, what we tend to do, and even why we tend to do what we tend to do. And this introduces and opens up the question, what can I change? What can I change in my external circumstances? Maybe when I use my phone or my laptop, or how many windows I have open. But also what I can change in my internal circumstances. If I notice certain problematic emotions and states of mind arising when I'm using my phone or some other app or device, maybe there are things that I can do to establish a more effective and a more balanced relationship